The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "Thus it is written that the Christ would suffer and rise from the dead on the third day, and that repentance for the forgiveness of sins would be preached in his name to all the nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things. Behold, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you, but stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high." Then he led them out as far as Bethany, raised his hands and blessed them. As he blessed them, he parted from them and was taken up to heaven. They did him homage and then returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and they were continually in the temple praising God. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You are witnesses of these things. You are witnesses. That's what Jesus says to the disciples in the gospel today. You are witnesses to the things that happened. According to Jewish law, an event would not be believable unless there were witnesses. At least 2. 3 would be better to attest to the fact of something happening. And the disciples were witnesses of the coming of Jesus, of his public ministry, of his passion, death, and resurrection, and his ascension into heaven. You are witnesses of these things. On May 13th, 46 pilgrims from our parish gathered in Dublin to be witnesses to the faith of the Irish people. We weren't there to sightsee. We weren't there to just wander about. We were pilgrims, and we were there to be witnesses to the deep faith of that people who have suffered so much. I did not know much about Ireland. I'd never been there before. I've known, of course, Irish people, but I'd not gotten into the culture, into the spirituality of Irish people before this. My experience was pretty much limited by Darby O'Gill and the Little People, thanks to Walt Disney. That was about supposedly Irish people. I knew about Lucky Charms. They had to do with Irish people, I thought. Then leprechauns and fairies. Heard about that. Leprechauns and fairies in Ireland. Of course, we know about St. Patrick, who in the 5th century began preaching the gospel, and the missionaries came into Ireland and converted the people to Christianity. I'd heard about the banshee. The banshee is that noise you hear just before you die. It's the banshee. Also, was familiar with corned beef and cabbage. That's obviously what we think of as Irish food, although it's not. It's really an American version from the immigrants. Corned beef and cabbage. I was in Ireland, didn't find it once. And what I learned on that pilgrimage, that what we think of as Irish food is simply food eaten in Ireland. That's what it is. Salmon, Irish food if you eat it in Ireland. Spaghetti, Irish food if you eat it in Ireland. Pizza, Irish food. And so I had to think about what I think of when I think of Irish food. If I want Irish food, go to Ireland. That's where they have Irish food at. But food is at the very heart of the character of the Irish people. They had a terrible tragedy that began in 1845 called the famine. Because of the weather, because of a blight, that the potato harvest failed. The potatoes were the basic food for especially the poor people. And without the potato, they didn't have anything to eat. In the process of that, while the people were beginning to starve, British business people decided that they needed to keep making their money, so they started hauling food out of Ireland, tons of it, beef, fish, grain, and went and sold it in Great Britain and let the people die. They starved to death, lots of them, over a period of time. Historians agree that the British government did not formulate a policy of genocide of the Irish people. That didn't happen, but the effects were the same, but for different reasons. That all of the people began to die. Between 1845 and 1852, 1 million Irish people starved to death or died of disease because of lack of nutrition. 1 million. In that process, 2 million left the country. They needed to get out before they died. And they left. Many of them came to America and to other countries throughout the world. It was a difficult time for the Irish people, but if they looked to the British government to help them, they got nothing. No help came. There's no shipments of food to feed them. They were left on their own with almost nothing to eat. Sadly, the British military had destroyed their fishing fleets, destroyed their means of gathering fish from the sea. And so they had no food that way. And so it was a terrible time. Our pilgrims visited beautiful city of Killarney. It's a wonderful place. We had a wonderful experience riding on carriages drawn by horses through the large park there. Had a wonderful time, great lunch. But before we left the city, we went to St. Mary's Cathedral. In 1845, the parishioners were building that cathedral. It was to be brand new, beautiful structure. But the famine became so severe that they had to stop building. And what the priests of the parish did is they turned the half-built cathedral into a hospital to deal with the people who were starving. There is an American cedar tree out in front of that church. Right now it maybe is 100 feet tall. In 1845 it was much smaller. But the priests used that tree as a memorial, and they began to bury the babies, the little children who starved to death. A lot of them, probably hundreds of them, are buried under that tree. And so we prayed for them at that memorial and remembered them as a people who suffered dearly. But in spite of all of that, they remained true to their Catholic faith. When Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church, started his own church, Anglican Church, he began to persecute the Catholics, not only in England but in Ireland. They weren't allowed to practice their faith. When Elizabeth I came, Queen Elizabeth I, she was even more severe. To her, the only good Catholic priest was a dead one, and she killed a lot of them. She killed a lot of Catholics, both in England and in Ireland. They passed what were called penal laws, which made Catholics non-citizens. They couldn't hold public jobs, couldn't vote, couldn't do almost anything, couldn't do anything. They were basically disenfranchised as citizens. And those penal laws would stay in effect until they were finally repealed in 1926. So they lasted a long time. But the Irish people, with their deep faith, continued to practice their religion in secret. If they were caught going to Mass, they'd be arrested, they'd be executed. But they learned to have it secretly out in places that were isolated. They would say Mass on these big rocks. They called them Mass rocks, where they were like altars. And that's where they would celebrate Mass in secret, away from the eyes of the authorities. They also had what were called hedge schools, in which they would gather the children behind the hedges so no one could see them and teach them their faith. That's what they did for many, many years. And as pilgrims, we witnessed the results of that faith. They were very dedicated, and we admired them. The question would come up, why didn't the British government help these people? Why did they let them die? Starve to death. It's a terrible way to die. Why did they let them do that, all the little kids? Just let them die. There was a politician that the historians talk about, Sir Charles Trevelyan, who, although he was not prime minister, had a great influence upon the policies of the British government in 1845. And he wrote that Irish people were lazy. They were not worth saving. And they, as far as he was concerned, they could all starve to death. In fact, they were visited by the famine as God's punishment for them being Catholic. They deserve it. Let them all die. And although that was in British policy, he had a huge influence on the lack of response, the deadly silence from the government when it came to the Irish people suffering. That would all change, though, eventually. The famine ended in 1853 because the weather improved, for one thing, and the blight ended so that they could start growing potatoes again. Second thing is because 1 million people had died. That's less people to feed. And 2 million had immigrated. So that's less people to feed. So the food that they had in 1853, they had enough for everyone because they had reduced the population by 3 million people. They either died or left. And so then that was the end of the famine. But no thanks to the government, who did not help them. It's significant that in 1997, Tony Blair, as Prime Minister, issued a formal apology, apologizing to the Irish people for the lack of response from the government during the famine. Said that it should never have happened. They did not deserve to be treated that way. I don't know if there's any connection, but 2 years after Tony Blair left as Prime Minister, he became Catholic. And so he had maybe some understanding of all those Irish Catholics who had suffered so much during the famine. But we were witnesses of that, witnesses of their deep faith, and admiring it as a living event. It's not something that just occurred in the past. In my interactions with Irish people, I can feel that tension, that sort of a sense of sadness that is a result of those terrible tragedies. Around, like in Dublin, they have these statue by the wharf of stick people. These people are starving, and they're waiting to get on a ship to get out of town so they could survive. And so it's a very real event. And so we witness that as we are called to witness the bravery of all people. All of us are called by Jesus to be witnesses. You are witnesses of these things. You are witnesses of the generosity and the deep spirituality and dedication of all the people in this community. You are witnesses to that. Do not ignore that. It's important to reach out to people who are practicing their faith, who are doing the works of charity, who are reaching out to the poor, who are working for peace, that we reach out to them and support them, not abandon them and not ignore them. Because in that way, we do what Jesus commanded the disciples to do, and that is witness to that. As we witness to the deep faith of the Irish people as pilgrims, so all of us are called to be witnesses of other people's faith, not just ours. This isn't just me and Jesus. That's not how this is set up. Jesus, from the very beginning, formed his followers into a community, and that's how we live as faithful people. We live in a community, in a church. And so we're called to support one another, be encouraging, be positive towards one another. If you see someone living out their faith in a very real way, support them, compliment them, be there for them, and help them so that it encourages them. Because one thing we found out as pilgrims in Ireland, that when you witness other people's deep faith, it deepens our faith. It makes us better Catholics to see all of the suffering that people did in order to continue to live in their Catholic faith. And so each of us are called to be witnesses of other people's faith, of other people's good works, of living out the gospel, because in that way we deepen our faith as well.